Did the Corinthians then assemble to celebrate conjunctly this ordinance of communion? How was it practicable? Since they are said to have been so many that they could not meet together in one place, and therefore supposed to be divided into several congregations. The difficulty here is wholly imaginary. How did the Christians of Edinburgh, St. Cuthbert's, and Leith hold fellowship in the supper? That all in these districts should meet together for the purpose is by no means requisite. Might not the church at Centrea, the port town of Corinth, and at but a small distance from it, have communion in the same manner by some of her members with the Christians at Corinth? Romans 16 verse 1. The sacrament behooved not to be dispensed in both places on one day. This was all that was necessary. But though the association of a few members from other congregations, as in this degenerate age, may produce a circulation of visible communion, the primitive Christians seem to have been more studious of fulfilling the design of the ordinance. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 20, we have a notice of their coming together into one place to eat the Lord's Supper. This was the second passage to be adduced. The terms imply at least a very general assembly for the purpose. They throw light on the reasoning in chapter 10. They confirm the view we have taken, and let out, as it were, by the manner of observance to which the apostle refers, and on which we have seen the strength of this argument depends. The author is no stranger to the use independents have made of the words now quoted to prove that what are called churches at Corinth, Jerusalem, etc., were but single congregations which could meet in one place for common worship. He knows also the replies of Presbyterians stating that the phrase does not always mean gathering into one place, but sometimes engaging in the same actions being combined to the same purpose or existing in the same state. But let it once be proved by valid arguments, as has been done, that the church at Jerusalem, at Corinth, etc., consisted of several congregations, or of such multitudes as could not all meet in one place for stated worship, and then to admit that the phrase epi to auto refers to place, so far from hurting the Presbyterian cause, must be in its favor, particularly on the head of communion. It will be found first that the phrase most commonly, if not always, except when used adverbially, or in regard to time, as in Acts 3 verse 1, signifies into one place. But secondly, that an extraordinary meeting or assembly is met. In support of the first position, we remark that only one passage is pointed out in the New Testament, where the words are thought to bear a different meaning. This is the quotation of Psalm 2 verse 2. In Acts 4 verses 25 and 26. The kings of the earth stood up, and the rulers were gathered together, epi to auto, against the Lord and against his Christ. And here a footnote, the verb here expressive of gathered together. When it has been demanded, did the kings of the earth and the rulers assemble together into one place against Christ? As far as a literal interpretation is concerned, the Jewish council met in one place, and the people of the Jews, with their rulers and chief priests, gathered also unto Pilate's judgment hall to have Jesus condemned. But kings? Well, Herod, tetrarch of Galilee, was also up at Jerusalem, and if certain punctilios did not permit him to meet in the same hall with Pilate, or to consult personally with him, they were at least both in one city, and that city a remarkable place, worthy of being hinted at, for such a combination against the Lord's anointed, the place which God had chosen as his rest, and made the center of his worship. But who sees not that both the words of the psalm and the form in which they are quoted must be figurative? Did kings at the time referred to, even in harmony of design, conspire against Christ? To make out kings, we must view Pilate as the emperor's agent and representative, and join Herod with him. But Herod also held his government of Tiberius, so that we have but one king or emperor thus represented. The words of the psalm are prophetically descriptive of all combinations that ever have taken place, or yet may, against the Lord and his anointed, and declare that though the greatest personages should enlarge in their combinations, disgrace and ruin must be the issue of their plots. The prophecy had a special reference to the conspiracy against Christ in the days of his flesh. In this, the emblem and pattern of every other combination was strikingly verified. Hence it is quoted with the commentary explaining it, and accommodating the very terms in that instance to Herod, Pontius Pilate, the rulers, and the people of the Jews. But the prediction is of extensive application, and it is adorned with such grandeur of imagery as might completely expose the folly of attempting to counteract the purposes of heaven. The kings and rulers of the earth are figuratively described as assembling into one place, meeting to concert their measures together, while God is represented as looking down on their assembly and observing their plans with a smile of contempt. And here a footnote. Other instances of the use of this phrase epi to auto are quoted from Dr. Lightfoot by Mr. Ayton, in which it is supposed to signify something else than into one place. These are from the Septuagint version. But on consulting the passages it will be found that in all of them the idea of one place may be understood. In some of them it can bear no other meaning, Judges 4, verse 33, and Judges 19, verse 6, as well as Isaiah 66, verse 17, is explained by verse 24, the allusion is to Tophet. Were not the companies mentioned in 2 Samuel 2, verse 13, met in one place, even at the pool of Gibeon, though on opposite sides of the pool they were as near as was expedient? May not the Septuagint have mistaken the sense in Jeremiah 6, verse 12, or what sense, according to their version, can be made of the threatening? In Psalm 30, verse 3, and in Psalm 49, verse 2, there was no occasion for inserting the notice of one place, but it does no harm, does not alter the meaning. Allowing, however, that harmony of design were the idea of this passage, must this always be considered as the idea suggested by the phrase? What tolerable sense could be put, according to this idea, to the Corinthians being said to gather together, epi to auto, to eat the Lord's Supper? When a phrase has different applications, the sense in which it is to be used must be determined by the place where it occurs or by other circumstances. The natural idea in the passage is evidently that expressed by our translation. But secondly, the phrase denotes some extraordinary meeting, or bears up some peculiar occasion of being together. Were not this the case, it would be quite pleonastic when joined with sunago, sunerkomai, or similar verbs. In plain English, when speaking of a multitude assembling, after saying they came together, to add into one place, would be needless, unless there were some peculiar reason for the intimation. For how can people gather together but into one place? The thing is implied in the very notion of their assembling. If we attend to the passages where the phrase occurs, we will find reason for its use. Abner and Joab, with their respective companies, met together in one place, or at a certain spot. 2 Samuel 2, verse 13, Septuagint version. This was no common meeting. They came to fight, and they met in one place as the scene of action. They that sanctify themselves in gardens, behind one tree in the midst, eating the abomination, shall be consumed together. Isaiah 66, verse 17. The Septuagint add epi to auto in one place, and by this they more forcibly express the sense of the Hebrew. These idolaters shall be consorted in Tophet, though their abominable mysteries were performed in secret companies or individually, and they shall all be associated in punishment and exposed together. Verse 24. In the New Testament we read, in Acts 2, verse 1, that when the day of Pentecost was fully come, the disciples were all with one accord in one place. Here the notion is proper. The occasion was remarkable, and the Christian dispensation being then only to commence, distinct congregations had not been formed. The same is obviously the reason of repeating the intimation in verse 44. All that believed were in one place, and had all things common. They remained at Jerusalem, unwilling to disperse or separate from one another, and the fellowship of the apostles. For some time, too, ere the church was reduced in order and the proper arrangements made, they resorted to the usual place of Jewish worship, the temple, and to show their unity in the faith, assembled together in one part of it, the area of Solomon's porch, verse 46. The only remaining instance is in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 23. If the whole church be come together into one place, and all speak with tongues, and there come in those that are unlearned or unbelievers, will they not say, Ye are mad? This is a supposition made for the purpose of effectually exposing the abuse of spiritual gifts, particularly of tongues, which obtained among the Corinthians. He would have them figure to themselves the whole church, met together, something which they did not witness every Lord's Day, and then consider what effect the conduct which prevailed in their several congregations, and which in these smaller meetings might be less glaringly absurd, would have in such an assembly. As if he had said, what sort of appearance to the ignorant or infidels would it have, if you were all gathered into one place, and the whole assembly were to engage in a confused clamor of different languages? Would they not take you for a convention of maniacs? Had he referred to their usual meetings, there had been no occasion for specifying the whole church. Nor would the question have been put as it stands. It would have been, do not the unlearned and the unbelievers think you are mad? If indeed the whole church usually met in one place, the appeal to imagination was quite unnecessary, and the sentence as laid is rhetorically viewed improper, if not inexplicable. But that the argument is hypothetical for the sake of striking the mind more forcibly with the absurdity of their conduct is evident, not only from his using the hypothetical particle if, but from his farther, for the same end, supposing them all endowed with the gift of tongues. We perceive then a reason for the epi to auto. What the apostle had stated in this hypothetical form he applies to their particular church meetings in verse 26 in regard to another abuse, but there he does not use the phrase. He simply mentions their coming together. When ye come together, everyone hath a psalm, etc., which was the actual existent case.